Hey guys, how's it going? I wanted to welcome you to the channel. If it's your first time here, be sure and hit that subscribe button down below and be sure and like this video. Get it up to 1,000 likes, I'd appreciate it. You guys ready to make something? Let's get going. Boom! Now, inevitably, whenever you buy plywood from the home center or your hardwood dealer, you're bound to have some damaging along the edges, whether it be on the ends or the long part of the edges. And you're going to have to trim off those in excess. So when you make your first pass to cut your pieces, you're actually going to have to oversize them, then turn them around and then cut off the damaged section to its final dimension. So all I'm doing right now is just cutting out the dividers, the tops, bottoms, and two sides. We'll cut the doors and the back later. Now, veneer and plywood is super thin, so you definitely want to take precautions in how you cut it. You either want to pre-score it with a knife or use you a blade that's definitely geared towards cutting plywood. I use the Ultimate Plywood and Melamine blade from Freud, and if you're interested in purchasing a blade like this for yourself, you'll find it down in the description below in my Amazon store. Now, just like any other cabinet that might be hanging on a wall, it's going to be made out of 1/2-inch plywood. This is just sanded ply. I don't really buy the expensive stuff for the backer, mainly because it's going to be screwed into. It doesn't need to be super pretty. Not many people are going to see it anyway. So we're going to oversize the first cut, flip it over, and then cut it to final dimension to take care of any damage on the edge. And this is why I always give myself a little added leeway when it comes to cutting plywood. Because if you don't handle it with kid gloves, you end up dropping it and damaging the corner like I just did. So I've got a little extra leeway to cut off, so that's what I'm going to do. Cut that off and then fix it. I've got the dado stack in, so what I'm going to do now is batch cut a lot of the dados and grooves that are going to be necessary for the doors to slide as well as the back to be accepted. And also there will be dados in the back to accept the dividers. The original cabinet, as you can see, had a center divider in one of the openings on the left and the right side of the cabinet. Now this is on its side, keep in mind. I'm going to omit this particular divider, and everything else is going to be adjustable shelving. The doors, however, were on sliding plastic tracks. Can't utilize those now because trying to salvage them out of this cabinet, they got damaged. So my original design anyway was going to have 1/4-inch dados along the top, bottom, dividers, everywhere. So no matter where the door slid, it was going to be accepted in an adjacent dado. So that's what I'm going to do is set up the table saw for a 1/4-inch dado with my two outer blades on my dado stack, set a 1/2 inch away from the blade, and I'm going to do the inner dados first. The outer dados will be more like a rabbet that will be encased with the face frame later. Now to get the second set of dados and grooves for the door that's going to be in front of the back, I've got the sacrificial fence put on and I've got the blade buried slightly so I can sneak up on the depth that I need. The 1/4-inch thick sheet of plywood that's actually going to be the sliding doors is actually narrower than 1/4 of an inch. But my blade cuts right at 1/4 of an inch. What I did do, because plywood isn't exactly straight to begin with, I mean sometimes it can be a slightly potato chipped, I actually widened these dados probably about 3/8 of an inch wide, and that will allow any kind of play that the plywood might have with the discrepancies of the plywood itself. So I widened both dados on all the pieces that are going to be accepting these doors. I've got to cut the dados in the sides to accept the back. I've also got to cut it in the top and bottom. So I have added a couple of chipper blades into the dado stack. Now 1/2-inch plywood isn't exactly 1/2 inch. There is a particular chipper blade in this stack that is slightly smaller than 1/8 of an inch to account for the discrepancy in plywood. This is probably going to undercut, which is fine, because this particular stack allows me to dial in very intricately the width of the dado that I need to. So if you guys are interested in this dado stack, check out my Amazon store, you'll find it there. When I cut this, I'm referencing off of the same edge as I made the two double dados right here to ensure that the pieces that I've already pre-cut are going to fit perfectly. So I'm keeping that same edge up against the fence. Now the left and the right dividers are going to have to be accepted in dados too, but not just in the top and the bottom. I also have to do it in the back. stack. So everything's gonna have to be batch cut. So I've got the fence set where it needs to be. The dado stack is now dialed in where it needs to be. So all I gotta do is reference off of one edge and then just batch all the dados out, and that way they'll all line up all the way around. So it's time to cut the face frames. It's gonna be all out of alder, really easy to cut. And I've got this one scrap piece here that I've jointed one edge on, and I'm gonna run that through 1 inch away from the blade and just have a bunch of 1 inch strips that I'll be able to adhere to the edge of the plywood. And then I'll have to do the same thing on a longer piece for the top and the bottom. Now going back to my plywood and melamine blade, I'm going to cut 12-inch wide strips on a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood for the 6 bypass doors. So after cutting up all the doors, they basically release their tension and they are all slightly bowed, no matter where I cut them. So I went ahead and cut some just shy of 1 inch wide plywood pieces, and these will help straighten them out. I'm going to put them on the backs of every one of the doors, close to the handle, so that way they'll glide nicely into the dados. Grab yourself some Titebond CA glue. I've got the thick version right here. Put yourself a couple of dabs in the important spots, which is one on the end, one in the middle, and then one on the other end. Take yourself your Titebond 2, 3, Gorilla Glue, whatever you use, and put it in between those dots. Take your spray activator, touch on those dots, and set it up against your guide, and then just hold it in place for about 2 or 3 seconds. Once the spray activator cures the super glue, it will allow the piece to be clamped in place with it, and then the Titebond will cure after its allotted time. Now just do a little bit of sanding on all your pieces, because it's easier to do now than when it's together. Now after finding center on all the panels, including the dividers, I'm setting up my adjustable shelf pin jig to start making some holes for some pins. And before I put this together, I'm going to take a little bit of paste wax and a toothbrush, and I'm going to wax up the tracks where these 1/4 inch doors are going to be gliding, and it will help them that much better. I'm also doing the same thing to the bottom of the doors. Now on the side where the cleat is at, I'm going to put some wooden knobs slightly south of halfway. Now when doing the assembly, these little right angle clamp blocks come in real handy. Even if you have dados, if you have a big cabinet like this to put together, sometimes having these will give you a little bit more leeway when it comes to glue setup time. Now before the top goes on, because the doors ride in grooves all the way around, I need to put the doors in place, at least the back set, because getting them in after it might be a little difficult. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it might be a little difficult. Now before this face frame gets put on, put in all your doors. Now that the cabinet is done, all that is left is the adjustable shelving. So I'm going to cut those up real quick and get those installed. Now that the shelves are cut, one big thing that I need to tell you. Since these doors are fixed and cannot come out, like I said, they're pretty difficult, you need to make sure that your adjustable shelving is going to be able to fit through this small opening. Luckily, my cabinet is taller than it is wide as far as the compartments go, so I can actually fit the shelf in and then lay it over and adjust the pins as I go. All right, last thing I need to do is apply a coat of sealer and lacquer. Just going to do that with my Fuji 3-stage siphon-fed gun. And if you are interested on how to apply lacquer using this kind of system, I did do a video on this about 2 months ago. Just check down in the description, you'll find a link. Well, that about wraps up the project. I think it turned out really good. It's nice, silky smooth with the lacquer finish. And the adjustable shelving has been installed. There are 3 on the left as well as 3 on the right that are accessible from both sides. And then I've got 2 adjustable shelves here in the middle. Hope you guys enjoyed this particular project, and if you have any comments, tips, or suggestions, be sure and drop them down below. Be sure and follow my Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if it's your first time. I want to welcome you. 1, 2, 3, boom!